we're obviously digesting a lot of news, including this new indictment today, superseding indictment. But as we think about the potential indictment of Trump for his role in trying to overturn the election, do you still expect we're going to see one by the end of this week?
Well, I have never thought it was going to be coming that soon.
Okay.
I doubt that they would be pressed up so close against each other, but perhaps next week or later on in August.
So do you think the news today might also make them want to give some space between it, too, even if they have other pieces they're working on?
Well, yeah, and I imagine that the special counsel is busy, focused on the addition of these new charges. I mean, this thing is like a classic mob prosecution where you start off with a few defendants and the mob boss thinks, well, if it's just one other guy, I'll be able to keep him under wraps. He knows that I'm not going to squeal on him. He won't squeal on me. Then you add another criminal defendant, and then it gets iffier. You start getting all kinds of prisoner dilemma considerations and implications. You add a fourth person, and then everybody starts looking over their shoulder because you don't want to be necessarily caught on the inside with the mob boss who's really behind the whole thing when you could just as easily tell the truth and get off much more lightly. So I think there's tremendous momentum in that prosecution based on the additional charges that were brought today in the superseding indictment.
And one of them, I mean, in addition to all of the back and forth mob boss language, which unquestionably the audio recording from the from that's included in the indictment is this Iran war document where Trump has already on record, or he's on audio, been recorded on audio talking about it, and now they seem to have it. What do you think? You've seen these documents. What's your view on the significance of that, the fact that they now have it in their hands?
Well, I mean, it's specific documentary proof of Trump's consciousness of his own guilt, his awareness that he was not supposed to have these documents, his arrogant contempt for the rule of law, and his boastfulness about having swiped these documents, and the bravado with which he showed them off to his guests in order to impress them. I mean, a lot of that is just extremely immature stuff. But the motive for taking those documents and for harboring them and for not turning them over is irrelevant, really. I mean, it might become relevant at sentencing, but in terms of the legally requisite intent, it's very clear. He had the intent to take those documents, to pilfer them. He had the intent to keep them out of view. And then he had intent to obstruct justice, apparently by trying to destroy the videotapes that would demonstrate everything that had been taking place with respect to his efforts to hide them.
So as much as we are all digesting this, you are so deeply embedded in all of the details around Trump's effort to overturn the election. So I wanted to ask you about these new Bernie Kerik and new significant witnesses that Jack Smith's team wants to hear from and talk to. What do you think the significance is of that, and what are you hoping to learn from them?
Well, the Department of Justice, the special counsel, has the full panoply of prosecutorial authorities and subpoena powers that we really did not have as the January 6th committee. It's remarkable that we got as much information we did because there were so many people who were shocked and dumbfounded by the fact that a president of the United States would actually engage in insurrectionary incitement and planning towards his own government. And so there were lots of people, including in the Trump White House, and lots of Republicans who came forward to speak. But of course, there were people who are far more on the culpable side who did whatever they could not to testify before our committee. And those are the people that Jack Smith is going to be able to bring in with the far more extensive powers of the Department of Justice. So, Mark Meadows would be one of them because he, had 1 foot in and 1 foot out with the committee. But he clearly had a very clear understanding of what was taking place, not just on January 6th, but in the run up to January 6th. And he had a very clear sense of what Donald Trump's purposes were. And he probably has a pretty good sense of how exactly they planned to get Pence to step outside of his constitutional role and either to declare Trump president or to kick the whole presidential election into the House of Representatives for a so-called contingent election where we would be voting on the basis of one state, one vote, which even if they lost Wyoming with Liz Cheney would produce a majority for them.
I mean, to your point, Congressman, Mark Meadows was there for all of it, right? He was the chief of staff in the room for a lot of this. We have the text messages thanks to the work of the January 6th committee. And recently, in the last couple of days, Governor Christie, who's prosecuted a lot of these cases, said that he's acting like a cooperating witness. What do you think of that?
Well, Mark Meadows is a fascinating character, and I think the historians will have a rich source of material in him. I mean, lots of the people we spoke to on the January 6th committee basically said that Mark Meadows was kind of like a mirror or a parrot of whatever they were saying. If they said, this is awful, we've got to stop it, he would commiserate with them and nod along and so on. But if it were Trump and other people were on the inside of the conspiracy, he seemed to go along for the ride. It would be fascinating to have some people testify about what he actually was doing. And so it's unclear. But I'm with you that if he were actually to recount with candor what took place, it would be extremely revealing as to Trump's actual movements and the directions, the calls that he was making on January 6th and January 5th.